Hello everyone. In this topic, we examine channel pricing. Under this topic, we discuss three major issues. First, what is a channel? Second, what is a channel conflict? And third, what is double marginalization? And how companies can avoid double marginalization. First, what is a channel? We are fairly familiar with the concept of supply chain, where companies get materials, they use the materials to build different products. So that's supply chain. Channel is the part that moves goods or services after supply chain or after the products have been manufactured. Usually in marketing, when we talk about a channel, we're talking about the components that move the products from the manufacturer to the retailer and eventually to the consumers. For example, a car is manufactured by the automaker, sent to dealerships, and then from dealership sold to consumers. So the next question is, what is the role of a channel in moving goods into the hands of consumers? Well, the advantage of having a channel is more obvious when we look at a market structure like this. So here we have two different markets. On the left, we have 5 sellers and 5 buyers. On the right, we have, again, 5 sellers and 5 buyers. The question now is, these two markets have different channel structures. Let's say for the channel on the left, the sellers are selling directly to the buyers without anything in between. So in that case, how many transactions are needed for this market to be fully established? That is, for every single seller to be able to sell to every single buyer. Well, the solution is simple. We need to connect every seller to every buyer. And since we have 5 buyers and 5 sellers, the total number of connections to establish this market is 5 times 5, that is 25 connections. The downside of a market like this, as you can see, is it is extremely costly for the market to be fully functional because each seller needs to develop 5 different relationships to sell the products. Now, let's look at a slightly different market structure on the right. So the difference is I have introduced an intermediary into the market, a third party between the buyers and the sellers. Once we have the orange box in the middle, the sellers and the buyers, they can congregate in this orange box market. And now, how many connections do we need for this market to be functional? Well, all we need is each seller to come to this market and each buyer to come to this market. Then the market on the right would be fully functional. So as you can see, the advantage here is for the market on the right, you only need 5 plus 5, 10 connections for this market to be fully functional. That is, for every seller to be able to sell to every buyer. So this is, by and large, the main advantage of having efficient channels. Can you think of some examples of the market on the right? Well, I'm sure many of you, given the reminder from the previous slide, have thought about Craigslist or eBay. Those are great examples. And in addition, in today's Amazon's third-party seller marketplace, it's similar. And if you think further beyond physical products, if you consider services, Uber, Airbnb, all these business models, they are the intermediary. As we call them, two-sided markets. So they are the intermediary to set up the connection between the sellers and the buyers. So very often in a channel, you would have multiple retailers to sell the same products. And unavoidably, when we have different selling bodies in the markets, they tend to generate various conflicts. Here are a couple of interesting stories. The first story is about Chantal. This is a local company in Houston. So Chantal sells various kitchen products. As you can see some examples on the right of the slides. And the product has been fairly successful. The starting of Chantal by Mrs. Chantal this was decades ago. Her family immigrated from Europe, and they start to sell these products at trade shows. So the way this business goes is the small manufacturers, appliance manufacturers, they would go to trade shows, and at the trade shows, they may be able to build connections with various retailers so that they can sell their products with the retailers. And the retailers, as part of the channel, will help them putting the products into the consumer's hands. So Mrs. Chantal went to this trade show. This was one of her early tangles. So she was there, and she spent 2 days. Almost nobody talked to her. She thought this was a poor start. And what she didn't know was at a trade show like this, usually the retailers would talk to established clients on the first 2 days, and then on the third day, they would start to explore new suppliers or manufacturers. So on the third day, people finally started to talk to her. So there was an old gentleman who came up and examined her products and showed a lot of interest in her products. And his name was Mr. Williams. It turns out Mr. Williams was as Williams and Sonoma Williams. As William and Sonoma started to carry Chantal's products, their businesses picked up greatly, and it was selling well. They have been very, very successful, and so successful that at one point, Costco went to talk to Chantal, asking them, would Chantal be willing to sell their products in Costco? So the question for you is, if you were in the position, what would you do? Would you go with Costco? Welcome back. Well, so the interesting thing is Mrs. Chantal actually turned down the offer from Costco. And her main concern was one that in marketing we have emphasized very often about branding. Her thinking process was, well, why would Costco would want to sell our products? It is because our products are popular at Williams and Sonoma. And because of that, our products have been perceived as a premier brand. Now, if I go with Costco, with the volume that Costco is pushing, it's a good thing. But in the meantime, I'll have to lower the price to sell at Costco. And if I lower my price at Costco, then Williams Sonoma would not be happy. And they could potentially drop Chantal from Williams Sonoma. And if Williams Sonoma drops Chantal, then Costco also would have less reason to carry Chantal. Then at the end of the day, it is a losing position if you are forward-looking enough. Those are some very strategic thinking out there. This also gives us an overview of how channel conflicts happen. When a manufacturer has multiple retailers, and these retailers would unavoidably have some kind of conflicts. So in this case, potentially the signaling value of how premium the brand is, or the different pricing levels that you charge at different retailers would both play a role. So in this story, Chantal chose to resolve the channel conflict by not selling at one of the major retailers. I'll leave this thinking to you. Do you have any way to potentially sell both at Costco and Williams & Sonoma without causing brand damage to Chantal? Our second example of channel conflict is famous Amos. Wally Amos here in the middle. He was the founder of the famous Amos chocolate chip cookies. And when famous Amos first introduced in the market, it was a gourmet chocolate cookie, high-end stuff, and it was delicious. So the product gradually built up demand and it became quite popular. Eventually, Wally Amos sold the brand to a syndicate of investors, and they were the ones operating the famous Amos brand. And the cookie became pretty popular, and at one point, Walmart was asking, "Can we sell your cookies?" And as you can imagine, for any small business, having Walmart means potentially in your distribution channel, you'll be able to sell at 100 times of the number of retailers that you used to have. In the meantime, the problem, as we have just discussed, is if you sell Walmart, then the perception of the brand would go way down. So it will go from more of a premium brand to everyone's brand. And then in this case, the owner of famous Amos cookie brand actually took the opposite approach. So they went with Walmart. And the rest is history. Now, today, we know famous Amos cookies are pretty much everywhere. They are just a commonly available cookie brand. Does this make the decision a poor business decision? Well, it's questionable whether it's a good or bad decision. I'm telling this story to show that the channel conflicts exist, and companies sometimes have to make a choice whether to position your brand as a premium brand where you're going to have to sacrifice the number of retailers available in the channel, or you can position it as a more of a lower tier brand where you can win by having a large market share instead of having a premium brand and high profit margin. So two stories of the same spirit, but two vastly different business decisions. This kind of channel conflict that I have just talked about using the two stories is called a horizontal channel conflict. So when we say horizontally, it means it happens at the same tier among different retailers. There's a different type of channel conflict that happens vertically. So here I'm going to give you a simple channel with two independent members, a manufacturer that produces the product, and the manufacturer would sell the product to the retailers at a wholesale price of W. And then the retailers would then sell the products to consumers at a retail price P. So in this channel, there are two stages: manufacturers selling to retailers, retailers selling to consumers. At the retail price P would decide the actual demand in the market. So this is the retail price and the demand curve. We have discussed this throughout most of the semester. So the demand is equal to A minus B times price. Remember that downslope demand curve. So in this case, keep in mind that the manufacturer and the retailers, they are not a team. So the manufacturer sells to retailers. They're not exactly coordinating with each other. So they independently maximizing their own profits. Okay, so in this independent channel structure, the demand curve, again, it's 100 minus price. So this is what the demand curve looks like. When you think about it, when price is 0, 100 minus price is 100. So that's why it intercepts here. And then when demand is 0, the price should be 100, which is why we are here. This again is A divided by B is 100. A is 100, B is 1, so A divided by B is 100. So this is the demand curve. And the situation we have here is, first, there is a variable cost. The variable cost only applies to the manufacturer, because the manufacturer is the one producing the products. And the manufacturer charges a wholesale price to the retailers. So the wholesale price is W. The key here is to realize that the wholesale price W is actually the variable cost for the retailer, because the retailer buys the product at W. Again, W is the cost for the retailer. Given that, we actually have gone through this exercise, then next, the retailer would sell the product to the consumers at a price that is influenced by the wholesale price W. And what is the optimal price here? It should be the middle point between the cost for the retailer W and A divided by B, 100. So this price should be 100 plus W divided by 2. And at that price, we can calculate the demand, 100 minus the retail price. And given this plot, we can calculate the profit for the retailer. The profit of the retailer would be the price minus the cost for the retailer and times the demand. So the profit is actually the size of this rectangle. The manufacturer charges a wholesale price and incurs a variable cost. And whatever the retailer's demand is, it's also the manufacturer's demand. So the manufacturer, in this case, would get a profit of wholesale price minus variable cost times demand. So this is the manufacturer's profit, and this is the retailer's profit. And then in total, the channel profit is what we define as the total profit made by the manufacturer and the retailer. So the channel profit is this red area plus this yellow area. So this total is the channel profit. And the calculation for a situation like this goes as follows. Conceptually, this is what we call a linear wholesale price contract. So the manufacturer charges a wholesale price that is fixed, and the total cost for the retailer would proportionally go up with the quantity. Suppose the manufacturer offers the retailer a linear wholesale price, W, and the variable cost is $20. So the manufacturer's profit is W minus the variable cost of 20 times the demand. And the retailer's profit is retail price minus wholesale price times demand. And the demand curve is demand equals 100 minus price. And the manufacturer and the retailer both optimize their own profits independently. So the question is, first, what is the optimal wholesale price? Second, what is the optimal retail price? And the third, what is the total profits for the manufacturer and the retailer? Next, let me go through the calculation steps. Here are the steps to calculate the optimal prices and the maximized profits. First, we calculate the optimal retail price. So here we are going to use the same formula that we have before. So it's A divided by B plus C divided by 2. That's equal to, in this case, 100 divided by 1 plus the wholesale price. So we do not yet know the wholesale price. Here the wholesale price is the variable cost for the retailer. So it's 100 plus W divided by 2. Then we calculate the demand at this retail price. So it's 100 minus the retail price. That is 100 plus W divided by 2. If you expand the calculation, what you get would be 100 minus W divided by 2. So that's the demand. Now, if we know the demand, we can formulate the manufacturer's profit. So that will be equal to the wholesale price minus the variable cost of 20 times the demand. That is 100 minus W divided by 2. So if I rewrite this profit, you see that the second component is 50 minus W divided by 2. If you treat the second component as the demand function that we have done earlier, A is 50, B is half. So the optimal wholesale price would be W equals 50 divided by half plus 20. that's the variable cost, and divided by 2. So this gives us the optimal wholesale price to be $60. Then, given the optimal wholesale price, we can calculate the manufacturer's profit in this condition. That is equal to 60 minus 20 times 50 minus 60 divided by 2. Then that is equal to $800. Next, we can calculate the retailer's profit. So the retailer's profit would be equal to the retail price minus the wholesale price, and then times the demand. So first, we need to figure out what the retail price P is, and then we can calculate the retailer's profit. So here, going back to the formula there, P is equal to 100 plus wholesale price divided by 2. Given that the wholesale price is 60, we have the optimal retail price to be $80. So the retailer's profit is 80 minus 60 times 100 minus 80. And that is equal to $400. Given the manufacturer's and the retailer's profits, we can calculate the total channel profit. In this case, it's 800 plus 400, it's 1200. So that is how we calculate the profits in a double marginalization situation. Now let's examine a different scenario. Suppose the manufacturer and the retailer, now they work as a team. The team has a variable cost of $20. So instead of the manufacturer selling to the retailer and the retailer selling to consumers, the manufacturer and the retailer would act as a single entity and they jointly sell to consumers. And the demand function is again the same. That is, the demand is equal to 100 minus the retail price. Let's look at the illustration of what happens when they sell as a team. It's the same demand curve. Demand equals 100 minus price. And the variable cost is $20. Now the question is, if the variable cost is $20, what is the optimal price? Well, we have done this exercise before, so the optimal single price here would be the center between the variable cost and A divided by B, that is 100 here. So the optimal price is 100 plus variable cost divided by 2, and the demand is 100 minus the price level. So this whole green area is the total profit for the manufacturer and the retailer together. The calculations for working as a team, so the total channel profits are profits equals the retail price minus the variable cost of $20 times the demand, and the demand curve is 100 minus price. Again, recall how we calculate the optimal price, and in this case, the optimal price is A divided by B plus C divided by 2. A is 100, B is 1, and C is 20. So if we substitute these numbers in, what we have is the optimal retail price is $60, and the demand at the optimal retail price level is 40. So the total profits in this case is $1,600. What's surprising here is we have done the calculation for the channel when the manufacturer and the retailers were independently maximizing their own profits. So that total channel profit was $1,200. So what is going on here when the manufacturers and the retailers, when they act as one entity, why is the profit so much higher? So the total profits with the linear price contract that we have discussed is only 75% of the maximum possible profits of 1600. What has happened? So here is a comparison using illustrations. Again, the two conditions we're comparing are when variable cost is 20 and the optimal price of manufacturer and retailer's team is $60. So that profit, 1600, is the area of the green square. And then if they act independently, the ultimate retail price is $80. So the total channel profit here is the red area, that is $1,200. Visually, you can already see that the size of the green area is larger than the size of the red area. So this phenomena is what we call a double marginalization issue. Why is it called double marginalization? When we have the case of manufacturer selling to retailers, that creates one markup. And then retailers to consumers, that creates a second markup. So the manufacturer marks up from the variable cost to the wholesale price. And then the retailers mark up from the wholesale price to the retail price. So that's two markups, two marginalizations. And the problem we can already see from the earlier calculation is when they do this, the total channel profit is actually lower than when the manufacturer and the retailer act together to set the optimal price. And alternatively, as you can think of, is if they were acting together, then they can split the $1,600 in a different way such that the manufacturer would get more than $800 and the retailer would get more than $400. Both of them would be better off if they coordinate, set a price, and resplit the larger pie from the total channel profit. Now the question, of course, is would it happen naturally without some kind of contract between the manufacturer and the retailer? What if the manufacturer lowers the wholesale price? So what happens? Now, what if the manufacturer lowers its wholesale price, let's say from $60 to $40? And if that happens, then it would allow the retailer to also lower the retail price from $80 to, let's say, $70. So if that's the case, then the profit situation for the channel would change because the demand would go up after the retail price is lowered. Then that red rectangle would change to the current shape. Then we can compare these three different rectangles. If you lay them out together, so in this case, the red rectangle in the middle, although it may be smaller than the green square, it looks like it's actually bigger than the bottom red rectangle. Wouldn't that be better for the whole channel profit? But the real question is, would the manufacturer actually do it? Would the manufacturer actually voluntarily lower the wholesale price? So here, let's think about it. In the bottom, this is the manufacturer's profit, and this is the retailer's profit. If the manufacturer lowers the wholesale price, although the size of the total channel profit is larger, the manufacturer's profit actually shrinks and the retailer's profit would expand significantly. So that channel profit increase is actually at the cost of the manufacturer. It only benefits the retailer. That is why the manufacturer has absolutely no incentive to voluntarily lower the wholesale price unless there's some kind of contract or agreement between the two entities for them to work together. So in the real world, here is an example. So nowadays we are migrating towards more and more streaming, but you can still rent new videos on Redbox. So here is a comment way back from the chairman of Viacom. So he said that the whole business was operating wrong There weren't enough tapes in the stores year after year. The studio kept raising price of tapes to companies like Blockbuster, already busted. When the price of tapes got up to about $65 each, we realized that we couldn't afford to buy enough tapes to sufficiently stock the shelves. What he has talked about, of course, was ancient history, when we were still using VCRs instead of DVD or Blu-ray players. Now we don't even use DVD or Blu-ray players, of course. What he has discussed here, the situation was the entertainment industry, the DVDs or videos, they used to be a double marginalization situation where the movie studios would produce the videotapes or DVDs and then they would sell the DVDs to video renters like Netflix or Redbox. And then Redbox would rent out these videos. The problem is, as we have discussed earlier, because of double marginalization, the wholesale price is pretty high for the retailers. So the retailers are not buying enough videos to fulfill the demand. And of course, we know that the demand for movies or videos was high in the first couple of weeks and it goes down quickly. So if they cannot stock up enough DVDs for the initial demand, they will be losing potential profits. So in this case, there was a happy ending. Redbox actually had agreements eventually with different Hollywood studios. What happens is they would sell video at low prices to Redbox so that Redbox can buy in bulk. And it does not come free for Redbox because the studios wants to keep more money for them as well. So Redbox would agree to release these videos a couple weeks later than these DVDs become available on the shelves of supermarkets. So that's the agreement they have reached. But the pricing model here between Redbox and the movie studios is, in a way, these two entities are acting together through contracts in order to lower the wholesale price so that they can stock up a larger number of products to fulfill the market demand. And to summarize the double marginalization issue that we have discussed, it is notable that when the manufacturer and retailers are acting together, consumers would actually see a lower price. So the price is $60. The optimal price is lower. And the demand as a result of lower retail price is actually higher at 40 in this case. When they maximize their profits independently, the retail price is higher because this retail price has to be set based on the wholesale price instead of the variable cost. So this retail price is higher, and as a result, the market demand is actually lower. It's 20 versus 40. This is why double marginalization is bad for both the manufacturers and the retailers, because in double marginalization, the retail price is too high and the demand in market is too low, and the channel profit, the total channel profit, is lower than what it could be. And finally, let me summarize the pricing design to avoid double marginalization is what we call a performance pricing. In this case, you are aligning the interests of two entities. And examples of this would include things like lawyers. Sometimes lawyers would take on cases without charging the clients, but at the end, this is especially common in financial lawsuits, but in the end, whatever the penalty the plaintiff receives, the lawyer would take a third of that money. Similarly, sports agents would take 3 to 5% of the athlete's contract amount. So in this case, the key is to align interests. That is, the two entities should be maximizing the same thing. Like the lawyer and the client both want to maximize the total penalty payout because each of them take a percentage of the same number. So overall, they share the reward and then they also share the risk. Of course, in cases like this, strict contracts and open communications are very, very important. That's all for channel pricing. Thank you. I'll see you next time.